And I will note that although I was on the conference committee, I would have to say that I, and I think a lot of the other minority leads on conference committees, played very little, if any, role in the actual work of the conference committee this year. And I think that's something that probably needs to change in the future if we truly want to end up with bipartisan outcomes that come before us for votes like the one here today. Fortunately, you know, when the bill left the floor here, it had almost no policy in it, but it also had almost no money in it. It had $25 million over base, which was completely unrealistic and unworkable, unsustainable, and would have created great difficulty for our public safety and corrections and human rights systems to function. And I think the Senate majority knew that. In fact, their entire premise was that they would come back with a better target because the governor and the House wanted to fund these agencies at more appropriate levels. And in fact, that's what happened. Because of the majority in the other body, the DFL majority in the other body, and because of Governor Walz, the investments in this bill are substantially higher than they were when they left the floor. And that's a good thing because the bill that we have before us now is much more sustainable on the long term and will advance the cause of our judicial system and our correctional system and our public safety systems in a much better way. Senator Limmer has already described what's in the bill that is good. In fact, I probably can't find any clunkers in the bill that I think shouldn't be there. But what's more distressing to me is that there are a lot of good bipartisan, good government policy provisions that should have become law this year but didn't, not only because they're not in this bill, but because they were not passed separately by both bodies of the legislature to become law. There are things that should have become law this year, but they got stuck in a messed up process. And members, I think it's too easy sometimes to say, just wait until next year, we'll take care of it then. Because if it's good policy, and if it ought to become law, then all the benefits of that good policy are lost for a whole nother year to the citizens of the state of Minnesota. So we need to work next year to make sure that the process is set up so that the policy moves along and doesn't get stuck in a permanent impasse. Now, there are some on the floor here today that are going to talk about some of the provisions that they sought to have become law this year that haven't. One that I'm going to note is the Department of Human Rights' request for satellite offices that would bring their services closer to the people that they serve. Because right now it's difficult. When you've got driver's license offices all over the state, motor vehicle licenses all over the state, and DNR offices all over the state, deputy registrars that provide a variety of services all over the state. But if you've got a claim that you want to describe in person relating to discrimination you're facing in housing or public accommodations, whether it's based on disability or religion or ethnicity or nationality or race, you really only have two places to go, St. Cloud and St. Paul. And it's really not fair to those citizens of Minnesota that they don't have regional offices that are closer to them so that they can most effectively help to get justice and enforce the human rights laws where appropriate. I would note that there are a lot of people who worked very hard to get their bills put into shape, to get stakeholder agreements. And in some cases, we're actually successful in getting the bills heard before the Judiciary Committee this year. But due to a failure of the process, they are not getting their bills passed this year. I'm going to note two other bills which I think it's a real shame and which are real harmful to the state's public safety that are not in this bill, that never received a meaningful hearing in the Senate. Actually, no hearing in the Senate. And those are the two gun violence prevention bills. The expansion of background checks to cover most scenarios other than family transfers for guns, to make sure there are background checks to assure that dangerous people are not receiving guns, or try to make efforts to prevent dangerous people from receiving guns, people already in law who are by law violent felons or domestic abusers who are prohibited from possessing firearms. Because you never know that unless you actually do a background check, do you? And so that bill should have been given a full hearing in the Senate, in the Judiciary Committee. So despite 2 years of requests, those bills have never been given a hearing in the Senate by the majority in this body. And I understand that was as much a leadership decision as it was a chairman's decision. And same with the red flag or extreme risk protection order bill. That would have given tools that law enforcement now lacks to seek a court order to remove firearms from those who are dangerous to themselves or others, and in some cases an immediate risk to the safety of others around them. Those tools are now missing, and those tools have been passed by Republican administrations around the country. I think there are now 13 states that have them. Democratic administrations around the country, rural, urban areas. Some of them have been in the wake of serious gun slaughters in other states. And I shudder to think that it may take one in Minnesota before there's the political will here to pass either of these bills. I hope that is not the case. Rest assured that the majority of this body will not escape accountability for their inaction. One way or another, they will be held accountable. So that's a real loss, I think, in this bill. It was an opportunity that we could have taken. I'm hopeful that next year, like I said last year, we will have hearings and we can have votes on the merits of these proposals. With that, members, I will reiterate I'm going to vote for this bill because of what's in there, and I'm just saddened by what the bill is missing.